Welcome to the New Hampshire Charter School webinar with Reaching Higher New Hampshire. My name is Liz Canada, and I'm the Director of Policy and Practice at Reaching Higher New Hampshire. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization based in Concord, New Hampshire, and we serve as a public education policy and community engagement resource for New Hampshire families, educators, and policymakers. In today's webinar, we're going to provide you with an introduction to New Hampshire charter schools, as well as details about the New Hampshire Department of Education's grant application, which resulted in a $46 million award from the United States Department of Education. Before we dig in, I want to offer a clarification that is important about charter schools. Typically, when I talk about charters, folks ask, what's the difference between a charter school and a public school? And the answer is, a charter school is a public school. So in this webinar, I'm going to clarify when I'm referring to a charter school and when I'm referring to a neighborhood school or a district school. Using charter school versus public school is misleading. Like I said, charter schools are public schools. But there are certainly differences between charters and neighborhood schools, and we'll start exploring that in this webinar. The United States Department of Education awarded the New Hampshire Department of Education with a $46 million grant specifically for charter schools. This announcement came out on August 22nd, 2019. I'm going to go over a very brief introduction to the grant award to set the context of this webinar before we get into the details of New Hampshire charter schools. First, the plan is to open 27 new charter schools over the next 5 years. When the New Hampshire Department of Education applied for this grant, there were 28 charter schools in New Hampshire. This means that the grant will help to double the number of charter schools over a 5-year period. You might be thinking, I've heard that there are only 20 new charter schools opening, so let me clarify where the number 27 comes from. The grant application states that the plan will be to open 20 new schools, but it also states that there will be 7 replication schools, and those will be based on current high-quality charter schools. So when we think about the number of additional schools that will open, the plan for the next 5 years will be to grow from 28 schools from the last school year to adding another 27 charter schools. Additionally, the charter school grant includes 5 expansions of charter schools, and that will be through a sub-grant process. In their grant application, the New Hampshire Department of Education identified 7 current high-quality charter schools, and we've listed them here for you. So let's cover an overview of New Hampshire charter schools. Typically, when folks ask questions about charter schools in the state, the question pertains to one of these 5 categories: authorization of charter schools, student enrollment and admissions, what does testing look like, what does accountability and oversight look like in New Hampshire, and finally, how are New Hampshire charter schools funded and how that differs from neighborhood schools. To be clear, though, there is certainly much more information about New Hampshire charter schools, but the purpose of this webinar is to provide you with an introduction. We'll cover each one basing all of our information on current charter school statute. First, New Hampshire charter school authorization. By authorization, we mean the application and approval process that a charter school must go through to open. There are 2 ways for a charter school to receive authorization. One is through a local school district, which means a charter school application is submitted to a local school board, which would vote to approve and authorize the charter to operate in the district. Currently, there is 1 charter school in the state that has been authorized by a local school district. The second way is through the State Board of Education. Charter school applicants can apply directly to the State Board of Education, and the board votes to approve and authorize a charter school. So who can apply to establish a charter school? Charter school statute identifies 3 groups that are eligible. The first is a nonprofit organization, which could include a college, university, museum, and so on. The second is a group of 2 or more certified New Hampshire teachers. And then the third is a group of 10 or more parents. Charter schools are authorized for 5 years. This is true for new charters as well as for renewal applications of current charters. The one exception is for local school districts. They are able to renew for 7 years. For New Hampshire charter school enrollment and admissions, we're going to begin with what I shared up front, which is that charter schools are public schools. But specifically, charter schools are also open enrollment schools, and open enrollment is defined in statute. An open enrollment school is a public school that educates students that live in that district and chooses to accept students from other attendance areas within its district and from outside its district. This means that charter schools can choose to accept students from anywhere in the state. Let's use Manchester as an example. If your family lives in the Webster Elementary School attendance area, your elementary school student would attend Webster if you're enrolling into the neighborhood school. Or your student could attend any charter elementary school, even if it isn't located in Manchester. New Hampshire charter schools cannot charge students or families tuition. They are public schools, so therefore they are free to students and families. Any student can attend a charter school, as they are open enrollment, which I just mentioned, but preference does exist for students residing in the district. You may have heard of charter schools that have a lottery process, if they have limited seats available or more student applications than they have seats available. The lottery process would then prioritize students who live in the district in which the charter school is located. Charter schools cannot discriminate or violate civil rights in any manner. So that covers most of enrollment, but admissions has a few details as well. New Hampshire charter schools may set maximum enrollment, though this is not required. This is typically done in the charter school application to the local school board or to the State Board of Education. For example, a charter school might cap their enrollment at 200 students. In their first year, they may have 50 students attend and then grow their student enrollment over a course of a few years, but not to exceed 200 students. This, of course, is notably different than school districts, which cannot cap enrollment. There is always a seat for that student, even if they transfer in mid-year. New Hampshire charter schools may limit enrollment based on a few factors, and this language is directly from statute. Charter schools may limit enrollment to specific grade or age levels, pupil needs, or areas of academic focus, including, but not limited to, at-risk pupils, vocational education pupils, mathematics, science, the arts, history, or languages. That first phrase is very straightforward. If you open a charter high school, for example, you would likely limit enrollment to 9th through 12th graders. The other areas listed in statute pertain to the charter school's mission and goals. If you open an arts school, you might prioritize enrolling students who are interested in the arts. This next bullet point also comes directly from statute. Charter schools may select pupils on the basis of aptitude, academic achievement, or need, provided that such selection is directly related to the academic goals of the school. This is similar to the bullet above. Charter schools are able to select students based on their school's mission and goals as defined in their charter school application. Next, we'll cover charter school testing, which is pretty straightforward. The question comes up of whether charter school students take the same tests as students in neighborhood schools, and the quick answer is yes. New Hampshire charter school students take the same statewide assessment, currently the New Hampshire SAS, or the SAT for 11th graders, just like students in neighborhood schools. Charters can also offer additional tests. Some charters administer the NWEA, for example, which would be in addition to the statewide test, not a replacement. And just like neighborhood schools, the costs of the statewide assessment is covered by the state. For New Hampshire charter school accountability and oversight, there are a few systems established in statute. Before I get to the bullet points, it's important to know that a charter school has its own governing board, a board of trustees. So they, of course, are an important part of the accountability and oversight of a charter school. Beyond each charter school's board of trustees, there is the authorizing body, the group that approved the charter in the first place. So that would either be the local school board, which, again, is different than the charter's governing body, or the State Board of Education. There is also a legislative oversight committee established in statute. This committee consists of 3 state senators, 3 state representatives, and a member of the State Board of Education. The last legislative oversight committee convened in October of 2015. The intent of this committee is to review what is happening in current charter schools and to provide guidance and recommendations to the department and the State Board of Education. Charter schools are subject to a first-year program audit by the Department of Education and a program audit once every 3 years thereafter. Summary reports created annually or periodically must be provided to the family of every student enrolled at the school and to the legislative body. And when I say legislative body, I mean the local district school board or the State Board of Education, depending on where the charter was authorized. Now, the charter school funding and finance is a question that comes up quite a bit, and it looks different based on where the charter school was authorized. Let's start with charter schools that are authorized through a local school board. And we need to back up to the authorization process. Part of the locally authorized charter school process involves a warrant article for districts with annual meetings in order to raise and appropriate funds for the charter school for the 5 years of initial adoption. For districts without an annual meeting, the legislative body makes that decision. For locally authorized charter schools, the district must pay the charter school 80% of the district's cost per pupil, as determined by the Department of Education, if the student resides in the district in which the charter is located. Let's use a specific example. Pace Career Academy is a locally approved charter high school located in Pembroke. Okay, and they used to be located in Allenstown, but for the purposes of this example, we're going to stick with Pembroke. In 2017-2018, the Department of Education listed Pembroke's high school cost per pupil as $14,147.35. If a student living in Pembroke attends Pace Career Academy in 2017-2018, the Pembroke district would send the charter school at least 80% of that amount, which would be $11,317.88. If a student is attending a locally authorized charter school outside of the district, the state pays the cost of an adequate education and differentiated aid directly to the charter school. So that's the funding model for locally authorized charter schools, and it looks completely different than charter schools that are authorized through the State Board of Education. State Board of Education authorized charter schools receive their funding directly from the state, specifically the Education Trust Fund, or, if there isn't money in the Education Trust Fund, from the state's general fund. State Board of Education authorized charter schools, unlike neighborhood schools, receive an additional $3,411 from the state per student. Now, this is a lot of text for one slide, but I want you to take notice of the letters on the left-hand side, and I'll walk us through each one. This funding is similar to a neighborhood school with a noticeable difference. Letter A is the funding per student enrolled. Every State Board of Education authorized charter school receives this money, and every neighborhood school receives this money per student. Letter B is the additional funding per student who qualifies for free and reduced price lunch. Letter C is the additional funding per student who is identified as an English language learner. Notice that D is missing. I'll get there in a moment. And E is the additional funding for each third grade student with a score below the proficient level on the reading portion of the statewide assessment, as long as the student isn't covered in letters B, C, or D. Okay, so what is D? D is the funding for students with special education needs, those with an IEP. Special education funding is not sent to the charter school where the student is enrolled, but is instead sent to the school district where the student lives. Charter schools then bill the neighborhood school or school district where the student resides for special education services in the charter. So, that covers our brief overview of what currently exists in New Hampshire charter schools and charter school statute. Let's return to the $46 million charter school grant awarded to the New Hampshire Department of Education. In their grant application, which they wrote in the spring of 2019, they identified 5 objectives for this grant funding to achieve over 5 years. Objective 1, increase, expand, or replicate the number of high-quality charter schools, especially those aiding at-risk, educationally disadvantaged students in rural and urban settings. Objective 2, use the funds to improve student growth and achievement among charter school students, increasing student graduation for college and career readiness. Objective 3, broadly disseminate charter school best practices to other New Hampshire public schools and LEAs to increase quality educational options statewide. Objective 4, empower current and new public charter schools to become fiscally strong, independent laboratories of innovation. To date, the only charter schools that have closed in New Hampshire were closed due to financial challenges, whether due to enrollment, fundraising, or other financial difficulties. And then Objective 5, strengthen and support authorizer quality and promote adoption of best practices for authorizers. As I mentioned in Objective 1, the goal for this charter school money is to support what the department has referred to as at-risk students. So we've gone ahead and identified 3 cohorts of students that are most often used to determine if a student is at risk. The first is free and reduced lunch eligibility, which is a federal designation for families that make up to 185% of the federal poverty level. In the 2019-2020 school year, a family of 4 with an annual household income of $33,475 or less would qualify for free lunch, and a family of 4 that makes more than that, but less than $47,638 would qualify for reduced lunch. This first bullet point comes directly from the charter school application, specifically on page 14. The statewide average of New Hampshire students who qualify for free and reduced price meal eligibility is 26.43%. A higher proportion of charter school students qualify for free and reduced priced meal eligibility. But according to our analysis of the department data, 20% of charter school students qualify for free and reduced price lunch. The next cohort of students is identified in the grant application as diverse populations. This is also from page 14. Although New Hampshire is not traditionally thought of as a language-diverse state, the New Hampshire public charter school population is ethnically more diverse than the state average. But, according to our analysis of the department data, there are currently 0 charter schools with more than 10 full-time admitted students who are identified as English language learners. The third cohort of students are those with special education needs, those with an IEP. From the grant application on page 15, Dr. Ames' research shows that New Hampshire is one of the few states in which charter schools enroll a slightly higher percentage of students with disabilities than district public schools. But, according to our analysis of DOE data, 14% of students in charter schools qualify for special ed services, which is below the state average of about 17%. The other component that we want to cover in our webinar today is the priority funding for opening charter schools over the next 5 years. New Hampshire's highest priority for awarding these funds will be to charter school developers that target educationally disadvantaged student populations and focus on increasing student academic achievement who are at greatest risk of not meeting challenging state academic standards. All proposed charter school applications that meet this priority will receive a competitive scoring advantage and be eligible to receive a larger award than those applications that do not specifically target these populations. So the funds will be awarded based on the charter application, and that's true whether they are authorized through the local school board or the State Board of Education, and they will receive more funding if they are targeting educationally disadvantaged student populations. We've covered a lot of ground today in this webinar, and there's more information to come. A few examples include teacher credentialing at charter schools versus neighborhood schools, special education services, which we alluded to briefly today, and transportation. And of course, if you have additional questions, please contact us. You can visit our website at www.reachinghighernh.org or email us at staff@reachinghighernh.org. Thanks for joining Reaching Higher New Hampshire for this introduction to New Hampshire charter schools.